Thank you. If I end fast, I'll just do a Bollywood dance for you. First of all, thank you very much for having me. I'm sorry I'm going to speak in English because I'm stupid and can't speak anything else. It's great to be back. I'm probably going to be shit. The guy in the other room is going to be great, so just go over there. So my talk is called How to Make Loveliness, because that's what HTML stands for, how to make loveliness. That is what Sir Uncle Timbo originally called it. The reason I am here is, well, why is any of us here? I was one of the editors of the 5.3 HTML spec, and I was on the committee that wrote the British Standard for Accessibility, and I co-wrote these books. But that's not the reason I'm here. The reason I'm here is that in 1998, I was head of primary and kindergarten at a school in Bangkok. And I got sick. And a code of conduct warning, next slide, contains nudity. I couldn't use my left leg or left arm very well, so I went to the doctor. And I was diagnosed with something called multiple sclerosis. This is my naked brain, my friends. Sorry. And that thing in the red circle is a sclerosis, and it basically fucked up my motor coordination. But in Thailand, they don't have MS. It's very, very uncommon far away from the equator. And in the 90s, it was very hard to get English language information. The doctors did their best. They photocopied some pages from medical journals, but I didn't find the photographs of autopsied brains particularly reassuring, to be honest. So when I taught myself to walk again, beside my apartment, there was something called an internet cafe. So I went into this internet cafe, and I typed in multiple sclerosis into Alta Vista, which was like Google, but in black and white and steam-powered. And I found this. This was Julie's joint, proper late 90s design, but it was a bulletin board for people with MS, newly diagnosed, supporting each other after their diagnosis. There were people from Canada, New Zealand, Norway, the UK, and this blew my mind, because my degree major is English literature and drama. I'm all about communication. And here was this thing where anybody in the world with access to, a computer of some sort, no matter what operating system, no matter where they were or their network, could communicate and collaborate and come together and work with strangers. And so I thought, this web shit, it's going to be the future, man. So because I talk like that, yeah. So when I left Bangkok to come back to the UK, I thought, I want to work on the web. So yeah, I'm not afraid to say it. My name's Bruce, and I'm an HTML-alcoholic. I love it. It's what makes every website. Anything that is called a website but doesn't use HTML is not a website. It is a Java shit, which is a shit made of JavaScript. That's the official term, asked Tim Berners-Lee. HTML contains many, many, many hidden treasures, and I've spoken to lots of developers, like people with years of experience, who don't know some of these. So if you do, bear with me. But some of the treasures are hard to find. You don't necessarily get told about them. So, for example, if you use HTML correctly, your sites will, I guarantee, be more performant. They will be more accessible to people with disabilities. That's not just blind people. That's not just people who are paraplegic. That's people like me who don't have terribly good fine motor control, so don't like to use a mouse. I bet many of you, when you're developing, you use keyboard shortcuts in your Visual Studio. I use keyboard nearly all the time when I'm surfing the web. Your websites will be more robust, less likely to break, in bad network conditions. There'll be less code to write. And this is great, because you don't get paid per line of code, right? More code Less code to write means less code to test. And less code to test means more time in the pub, which is every developer's God-given right. Am I correct? So let's look at our HTML treasure map. Use HTML properly. I will show you how. Write more HTML. Use CSS properly. Come and see Vasilis's talk later. Give us a wave, Vasilis, and he will talk about CSS properly. And Bruce's massive mantra, built-in beats bolt-on bigly. If HTML and CSS give you something for free, don't fuck about replicating it in JavaScript. Use the HTML. Built-in beats bolt-on bigly, because Bruce is boss. Remember all the B's. Now, I'm not scared of things like React. This was in Bucharest. React, run! But I didn't run. In fact, in my day job, I work for Babylon Health, but this talk is personal and does not reflect blah, 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 my employers, blah, blah, blah. I use React Native all the time, and if anybody here is good at accessibility QA on mobile devices and understands React Native and doesn't quite hate it, talk to me, I have jobs for you. But these things, React, Angular, etc., are tools. Yes, they are they got lots of money behind them, and they are super well-known tools. But nevertheless, they are just tools. I don't care if you want to use React Angular Bootstrap Hubpack.js in your next project. Knock yourself out. This doesn't actually exist, but I have a thing. I like to get a walrus in every slide deck. But the point is, make sure your framework uses HTML properly. By all means, use a tool to produce HTML, but make sure the HTML it produces is good HTML. Who likes furniture? Please give me some, because I burned all mine to keep warm during Brexit. So, Furniture's great. You can sit on it and all kinds of cool shit. This is the Bible for furniture makers. It was published in the 70s, so it's a bit sexist, but it is the Bible for all woodworkers. What's interesting about this 500-page book is the first 100 pages does not talk about furniture at all. Now, I can see you're all fascinated by furniture, so that's a bit of a blow. But the introduction says, any textbook concerned with the techniques of furniture making must deal primarily with the basic handicrafts, for it's on this groundwork that machine production is built. And in fact, all the machine can ever do is translate the essential hand operations into rotary movements of the cutting tool. My obvious metaphor is that React and those kind of things are the machine that make your HTML. And so the first 100 pages of this book doesn't talk about furniture. You get this interesting tables about the level of humidity and moisture in different kinds of wood and their radial shrinkage. You get these diagrams of where to cut stuff. You get these nice photographs of the grains of different wood, because you will never make good furniture if you do not understand the raw material, as the book says. If he has to saw that piece of wood by hand, he'll be more likely to know that much more about it, greater respect for it, and will understand it in greater depth, the problems that will be faced in its manipulation. Know your HTML and then use React to produce it if that's what you want to do. But know your HTML. There's another, I'm fascinated by furniture. God, I love furniture. Whew, look at that chair. Wow. So this is a book by Mr. Tosho Odote, Japanese woodworking tools. And he says, the Japanese word shokunin is defined by both Japanese and Japanese English dictionaries as craftsman or artisan, but such a literal description does not fully express the deeper meaning. Shokunin means not only having technical skill, but an attitude and social consciousness, a social obligation to work his best for the general welfare of the people, an obligation both material and spiritual. So I don't want you to be an artisan of the web. I don't want you to be a React cranker. I want you to be a shokunin of HTML. This is Sir Uncle Timbo, or Sir Tim Berners-Lee, as you call him. And when he invented the web, he said, this is for everyone. And it was. This is the first ever web page running in a modern browser. It's Chrome 70-something. And as you can see, I can shrink it and everything reflows. I can hit the tab key and go through all the links, and I can see where my focus is. And if I hit enter, I can go to the place where that link is. Out of the box, from 30 years ago, the web was responsive and accessible out of the box, but we broke it. And we broke it in many horrendous and frankly criminal ways. At one point, we decided that all web pages should have a fixed width. Then widescreen monitors and tiny mobile phones came along, and we all went, oh God, why doesn't everybody have the same equipment that I have? We decided to use bad contrast and horrible fonts and colors. I have pretty good eyesight for a nerd, but I struggle to see thin grey fonts on a white background. We thought we should have pixel-perfect layout. We thought we should have videos and not bother with captions. We thought it would be a great idea to break keyboard accessibility. Those of us who use the keyboard all the time when we're developing decided to prevent people from using the keyboard on our websites. We thought removing the focus indicator so people like me who use the keyboard have no damn idea what we're focused on. Billy Gregory said, when UX doesn't consider all users, it should be known as some users' experience, or SUX for short. So I urge you to engage and understand the raw materials of the web. And they are, of course, JavaScript, HTML, HTML5, and CSS, CSS3. These things are not in competition. These things are the twin, whatever the word for twin is. These are the triumvirate that holds up the web. To prove that they don't hate each other, here is Brendan Ike, who invented JavaScript, me, who works on HTML, and Halcombe William Lee, who invented CSS, having a lovely pint together. Notice we are not hitting each other. Yeah, that was after about pint 5 or 6. Halcombe thought that Brendan was looking at him funny, and it all went tits up. But actually, we all get along well. Now, obviously, that's me, not Tim Berners-Lee. I didn't invent the web. I just invented the picture element. But fuck it, I'll take some credit. I read this article a while ago. I've taken away the author's name because it's not my intention to shame an individual. It's my intention to harangue an entire way of thinking in the industry. 10 things to learn for becoming a solid, full-stack JavaScript developer. Top 4. Have a fundamental understanding of JavaScript. Well, that's kind of important for a JavaScript developer. Of course, you can't do any full-stack JavaScript development, or indeed any web development without learning JavaScript. Yes, you can. You need to know a front-end framework, apparently. And you need to know Bootstrap 4, apparently. Oh, HTML and CSS. Because apparently, for HTML, there's not much to learn, and you can kind of learn as you go. It's worth knowing the difference between span and divs, because it will save you a huge amount of headache when fiddling with your CSS code. This disparagement, this condescension towards 2 of the 3 pillars of the web is not a full-stack developer. It's a full-stack JavaScript fucker-abouter. So, in the same way as you know your wood if you're a carpenter, you need to know your CSS and HTML if you are a web developer. HTML is declarative. You say button type equals button, click me, and it just appears. This is magical. Like when I was learning the web, this was magical. I don't need to know how to position the button or where it comes from or do anything clever to make it listen to the keyboard. I just declare it to be so, and it is. I felt like a god, my friends. HTML is fault-tolerant. The blink tag, which I was saying, oh my god, you're having a seizure. The good thing with the blink tag, and this is the only good thing Internet Explorer ever did, is Internet Explorer did not support the blink tag. But, and this is crucial, Internet Explorer would still show the text, "Oh my God, you're having a seizure." It just wouldn't blink. HTML, if it sees a tag it doesn't understand, it will just show you the content. And this is a magical property because it means that the web is backwards and forwards compatible. So when we invented the video element in HTML5, if a browser understood the video element, it would show the video. If a browser didn't understand the video tag, it would just show this paragraph, "Can't play it," and a link to download it on your operating system's media player. Everybody had access to the content. Some people got better access because they had a more modern browser, but nobody was locked out. This is vital. So HTML3, which never happened, was silly. They invented a fig element with a source attribute. And that meant any browser that didn't understand the fig element would show nothing. That was breaking forwards compatibility. HTML5 has a similar thing, a figure element, but inside is an image and a fig caption. A browser that doesn't understand this will still show the image and show some text. This is absolutely magical. So when we invented the picture element for responsive images, we just basically used the video element template and made a picture element. IE5 users will see small.jpg. Modern browsers will see tiny.webp, but everybody gets something. So I've shown you the first web page in a modern browser. This is my personal website in the first ever web browser, which was reconstructed by a team including Jeremy Keith, who you can see tomorrow. So it doesn't have the best UI. I am no designer, but even I can see this isn't very pretty. But I can go to my website. Okay, so it doesn't understand Unicode. It's got no styling because CSS didn't exist when this browser was made. But you can still access all the content, and you can still tab through all the links, and you can still go to the places. So you've seen the first ever web page works in a modern browser. You've seen the first ever web browser can still use HTML if it's written properly. HTML is interoperable. This is misnested. Previously, the HTML spec only defined what to do with perfectly written markup. Now, I look at your faces, I can see that none of you have ever had a syntax error in your life, right? But you probably know some wasters on your team who occasionally get syntax errors. HTML4 never ever defined what to do with incorrect HTML, which meant that some browsers would put the B inside the I, some would put the I inside the B, some would put them next to each other. HTML5 has an algorithm that tells the browser exactly what to do with any feasible combination of misnested markup, which means every browser will produce the same DOM, no matter how misnested the markup is. This is the parsing algorithm, but I like to think of it as the HTML5 ninja. Super powerful, looking out for you, and you don't even notice it. CSS is also fault-tolerant. Here, I'm saying lots of different backgrounds. I'm saying the button is the font color is black, it's got a background of white. If a browser understands background image of linear gradient, it overwrites that and I get an attractive gradient. If the browser understands CSS Houdini, it overwrites that and paints something magical. But everybody gets something. This is the power of the web. JavaScript is not declarative. You have to tell it exactly what to do, and if it fails, it dies in a heap. There's nothing wrong with JavaScript. JavaScript is absolutely great and brilliant. But only use JavaScript for things that HTML and CSS can't do, because as Sir Uncle Timbo said when he invented the web, use the principle of least power. Use the least powerful technology to achieve the thing you want. If you can do it in HTML, which is less powerful than JavaScript, do it in HTML. In other words, use the right tool for the right job. 13 million requests for JavaScript will time out, said a BuzzFeed developer. Now, BuzzFeed is not something that's consumed in, Rwanda or Nepal. This is a Western-oriented thing. This is for people like us. But nevertheless, their stats show that 1%, i.e. 13 million of their requests for JavaScript, time out every month. My friend Stuart Langridge has this web page. Everybody has JavaScript, right? Well, not necessarily. There's a myriad different reasons why the JavaScript that you're sending may not be seen and parsed by the recipient. Maybe in 5 minutes' time it will, but maybe now it won't. You need to design for what happens if JavaScript fails. Freebies. This is a great pun. Enjoy it. You can laugh. Freebies. HTML gives you loads of free shit. Who doesn't like free shit? So, for example, we've all seen or coded this. Check if you don't want not to opt out of cancelling us, stopping sending you spam forever. Okay, we've all written this or seen it. The two are coded differently, but apart from a slight amount of spacing here, because I'm not using any CSS at all, they look almost identical. The difference is the top one, if I click inside the text, it doesn't do anything. I have to have super excellent marksmanship to click inside that box. The bottom one, I click anywhere in the text and the box is filled in. This is great for somebody who has Parkinson's disease or somebody whose MS is worse than mine, but it's also great if you're sitting on a bumpy train or you're a passenger in a bumpy car with fat, geeky fingers trying to press a checkbox on a small phone. It isn't just disabled people, it can be any of us. The difference is the first one has input type equals checkbox and just a span with the click if you don't want not to opt out. The second one has an HTML label associated with the input. And this has two magical properties. By doing this, by us having a label and associating it, if I click in that, that will get filled in. If I'm a screen reader user, tabbing between links and form fields, when I tab into this, that is automatically read out to a screen reader user. You as a developer have to do nothing other than know this exists and write it. Magical, free. Because your app makes an accessibility tree which talks to the operating system, which talks to the screen reader, which talks to the user. If you tell it, this is a checkbox, the operating system knows what checkboxes are. It tells the screen reader, which tells the user. If you make a span and put some borders around it to look like a checkbox, it isn't a checkbox, so it can't tell the operating system, so it can't tell the screen reader, so the user never knows. Buttons are fab. If you do this, a div with class equals button, because everybody knows that developers are allergic to vowels. This is cool. You can make it look like a button, but you have to remember to set the ARIA role in HTML or CSS or JavaScript. You have to remember to manage focusability because divs are not keyboard focusable by default. You have to remember to listen for the correct key presses. And of course, you are clever enough to do that, but the person who inherits that code when you get promoted to like Lord of Code in your organization, are they clever enough to know that? If somebody copies and pastes that, are they going to copy and paste all of it? Or you could just use a button. There's research on why on the web we found 92 different variants of button-related elements, but we're looking at that to make them more customizable. We've all seen this. This could be YouTube, and each div class equals article as a video, or it could be Amazon, and each thing is a product, or it could be a news site, and each one is an article. In HTML4, we didn't have a way of marking up, this is an article, this is the sidebar, this is my navigation. HTML5, we do. The div element has no special meaning at all. So if you can put a nav element, instead of div class equals nav, do it. div is 3 bytes, nav is 3 bytes. You're not hurting performance by sending a few extra bytes here. But you're giving useful stuff to people who need them. 25% of screen reader users will use nav, header, footer whenever they're available. 18% will use them often, 28% will use them sometimes. This is vital. This is a friend of mine called Leonie Watson. She is interesting in that she went completely blind age 20. But before that, she was a visual designer. And now she's completely blind and she uses a screen reader. So with the nice people from Smashing Magazine, we did a webinar. And because I believe in eating my own dog food, I asked her to show people what my website, because I didn't want to name and shame somebody else, but I'm happy to shame myself. Look at my clothes. Of course I'm happy to shame myself. This is what she said.
Lawson's personal site, Mozilla Firefox. Bruce Lawson's personal site, 27 regions, 21 headings and 187 links. Bruce Lawson's personal site, visited heading level 1 link, Bruce Lawson's.
So I'm going to stop that there. First thing you learn when you've got a screen reader is the key to stop it talking. There is only so much talking in your ear you can cope with during the course of the day. And in most screen readers, the control key is what will stop it talking. What you heard then was the screen reader do several things as the page loaded. It told me the title of the site, Bruce Lawson's personal site. That's the bit that's contained in the title element inside the header elements on the page. These days, I understand in the visual appearance of browsers, that's not a very visible piece of information. Back in the day when I last saw a browser, the title was very often displayed quite prominently at the top of the browser window. But for a screen reader user, it's still the first piece of information that you encounter on the page, and it's incredibly useful because it's often the first guarantee or first confirmation that you've got that you've ended up on the page that you intended to reach. You might also have heard that the screen reader then just gave a quick summary of some of the key elements on the page. It told me there were some regions on the page and some headings. So already that's given me a bit of a clue as to how I can start exploring this page. One thing you can't do as a blind screen reader user is take in the page at a whole glance. When most sighted people look at a page, they'll kind of notice, yeah, I can see the header and the footer and maybe the navigation off to one side and a content area somewhere. But of course, you can't do that sort of holistic assessment of a page as a screen reader user. What you can do, though, is use the regions of a page. So in JAWS, if I hit the R key, we'll start to explore the page in regional chunks like this.
Navigation region.
So it tells me there's a navigation region on the page, and if I hit that key again,
Search this site clickable, search region.
I've got a search region on the page.
Main region.
A main region, which tells me, all things being equal, that's the main content area of the page.
Heading level 2 link reading list, banner.
And then I come to a banner area, so something that's using the
Alert, Laura
element.
Katz has left the meet.
And keep
Posted
going.
in content information.
Some content information, so that's the footer there. And we can keep going through the page like this to find the different sort of chunks. And all this is picked up probably by the use of the HTML5 sectioning elements, header, footer, nav, main, or it could possibly be because Bruce is using the ARIA role equivalent, role equals banner, role equals content info for footer, role equals main.
You can see that by using header, footer, nav, and styling those with CSS, you know, if you have div class equals nav, and the styles are applied by the class equals nav, if you just change that to nav class equals nav, the CSS will still work. It won't look any different to sighted users, and to somebody who's disabled, you've made their lives easier. What's not to love? Do it. I'm really happy that in a survey of 1 million websites made by HTTP Archive, on 50%, more than 50% of all pages, footer, header, nav are there. Use them. You can also use structured data. I'm not going to go into this too much, but Google and people like me have been saying to people, if you use your data and actually structure it properly, you get benefits. But last year, Google actually told us what those benefits were. 100% increase in year-on-year growth by using structured data, 115% increase in organic traffic, 270%, blah, 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 blah. Do it, your bosses will love you, there'll be a massive statue of you with laurel wreaths in the car park, you'll get your salary doubled, etc. Just do it. What I do on my website is each article, it's a blog, each article has an item type, of a blog posting. Schema.org is a central repository. They have everything from football matches to medical equipment. My H2, I say it's the headline. My time, I tell it it's a date created and it's the date published. And for Apple, you need to say pub date, because web development would be much less fun if Apple did the same things as everybody else. What's good about this is on a Safari reader, on an Apple Watch, it has a default layout for things in an article. It'll lay them out nicely. It just gives it to you for free. If you give it the title and the author and the pub date, you just get this free default layout. Now, I know what you're thinking. I wrote that markup 8 years ago, and you're looking at me thinking, Bruce, you are not beautiful, you are not glamorous. How did you get on the early beta of the Apple Watch to do this? Well, I didn't. I didn't know there was going to be an Apple Watch 8 years ago when I wrote this markup. I wrote this markup because it's semantic, and a new device came on board, and it uses a semantics. I could never have guessed this, but because I wasn't using divs and spans, I used proper markup. It just works. Same with using form controls. Type equals tell, type equals date, select. Just work on devices. Accessibility for disabled people is also part of usability. There was some researchers in a place called Switzerland, which you may have heard of. Schmutz, Sonderegger and Sauer at the University of Freiburg in Switzerland. They tested different levels of accessible websites with people who had no disabilities, people who didn't need accessibility. And they found that a high level of web accessibility led to better performance, task completion time and task completion rate than low accessibility. These are people who didn't need the accessibility. High accessibility improved user ratings, perceived usability, aesthetics, workloads, and trustworthiness compared to low accessibility. Accessibility and semantic markup helps everybody. There's a link to the PDF. If you want to, I'll put the slides online so you can grab the link later. Yay, Switzerland. My friend Jamie Knight, who's quite a severely autistic web developer at the BBC, he said something which really resonated with me. No one comes to our sites disabled. They come with impairments. We disable them. If you take nothing else from this talk, take this. Where the fluffy bunny of good HTML goes, the Tweety birdie of accessibility goes along for the ride. And they were delicious, by the way. Absolutely lovely with a good sauce. This bloke, Timbo, said the web is for everybody, and collectively we hold the power to change it. It won't be easy, but if we dream a little and work a lot, we can get the web we want. As the car parking machine says in Chinatown, in my hometown, change is possible. What can you do? You can learn the semantics of HTML. There are 120-ish elements in HTML. That's all. If that sounds like a lot, the average 2-year-old can say 100 words in their native language. By the time your toddler is 2.5, she will probably know 300 words in her first language. HTML is the first language of the web. All I want you to do is be better than this. Look at it. It was delicious. What else can you do? Learn the semantics, run automated tests, and go for the low-hanging fruit. A survey of the top 1 million websites showed that low color contrast, missing alt text, empty links, missing form labels, missing document language are the most common errors, and they are trivial to sort out. Trivial. Ada Cannon Rose has a contrast widget that will show you on the page where there's inadequate contrast. You can crack open the dev tools, try some different colors, correct it, change your CSS, bang, you're done. Use HTML and CSS where possible. Make sure that sites work without JavaScript, and then make them work really nicely with JavaScript. Choose your libraries carefully. I look under the hood of the libraries. 10on.io, for example, is Bruce approved. They test it with people with disabilities. React Bootstrap is not Bruce approved. Their navigation component uses a bloody div. They could just say nav class equals nav, but they don't. What no nav? Bruce rejected. It's not only React, Angular as well, their side menu uses a bloody div. It could use a nav, it's 3 bytes, for Christ's sake. Also, don't do this. Don't vomit loads of JavaScript all over your site to compel it to work. As Alex Russell, who used to work for Google, now works for Microsoft, said, we need to confront the developer experience bait and switch. Tools that cost the poorest users to pay wealthy developers are bunk. Smartphones. You know about smartphones, but the vast majority in the world, I looked at this last week, the vast majority are Android, low spec, low price, $18 to $20. This is what the world is using. I'm doing some work in these nations at the moment. As a 1 gigabyte of mobile data as a percentage of monthly income. In the UK, 1 gig of mobile data costs me 0.016% of my salary. In India, it's 0.05%. In Indonesia, it's 1.5%. In Rwanda, it's 5.5% of their monthly income to afford 1 gig. How big is your website? Looking further afield, in Malawi, it's 13%. In Yemen, where I was born, it's 16% for 1 gig of data. The difference across the world is huge. The highest average cost is 30,000% more than the lowest, and we in Western Europe are paying the lowest. Imagine how much your site costs to download. And it's not just the cost, it's the speed. The median UK download speed is 28.5 megabits a second. In the US, it's 54. In Hong Kong, it's 112. In Rwanda, it's 0.81. Are they going to download your 30 megabyte app? Would you? Responsive images, you can use these. You've probably seen how they work. I kind of helped invent them. I'm happy to bore you about them in the breaks. HTML hell reduced the total image sizes from 1.72 meg to 172K just by converting the images to AVIF and using the picture element to send JPEG to older browsers. Trivial. In Nigeria, the data needed to watch 2 minutes of online video a day can cost more than sending a child to school for a month. The video of your CEO walking around the office showing the beanbags and the pinball machine, it's great, I love it, I want to come and work with you, but I guarantee it's not better than sending a child to school. Your React app will never load faster than 1.1 seconds on an average phone in India. There are 7 billion people in the world, 1.1 billion like us with high-speed internet. It's 5.2 billion people with mobile phones who could access the internet. By the year 2100, 50% of all humans will live in these 10 countries. Only one of them is what we would probably call a developed country. And to be fair, after Trump, I have my doubts. Developing countries are home to 94% of the global offline population. The World Bank said in a 2016 report called Digital Dividends, making the internet universally accessible and affordable should be a global priority because it's not just a way of looking at funny videos of cats. It's not just a way of sighing with nostalgia at your high school ex's Facebook photo. We earn good money from the web. You can afford to come to a conference, or your bosses can afford to pay for you to come and give you the time off. I get flown across Europe and put in a nice hotel because of the web. Let's pay it forward. If you have a feature phone and an access to the internet, you can get Where There Is No Doctor, a very simply written, lavishly illustrated book for people who are not medically trained. For many people, this is global frontline healthcare. For many people in the world, School textbooks are unaffordable. But if you have a feature phone or a low-spec Android phone and access to worldreader.org, you can get school books in your own language for free. Lots of people in the world have the wrong religion, or the wrong sexuality, or the wrong opinions because of their despotic governments. But the internet gives them a lifeline to the outside world. As Mr. Ghonim, an Egyptian activist in the Arab Spring, said, if you want to liberate a country, give them the internet. And if you don't like my hippie bullshit, here's some numbers. McKinsey, who are a massive conglomerate who advise governments and things, they said an increase in internet maturity, similar to one experienced in mature countries over the last 5 years, creates an increase in real GDP per capita of 500 US on average. For comparison, it took the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century 50 years to produce this same result. We cannot, in all conscience, lock these people out of the advantages that we've had by making our lives marginally easier by not coding properly for the next people on the planet. Because the internet is not computers, the web is not clouds, it is these women in Africa, it is this blind guy in Toronto, it's these ladies I met on a bus in Bangladesh, it's this woman in a wheelchair in Taiwan, it's this Cambodian farmer and his granddaughter that I met when I was in Siem Reap. It's this guy on the New York Metro. As Satimbo said, it's for everyone. Kisses. Bye.
Thank you so much. That was hilarious. What about your Bollywood dance skills?
We've run out of time, unfortunately, Anne. But if you want to dance with me, come see me in the break. I'm here all
Yeah, or at the mingle maybe later.
in the mingle. Yeah. Bring me a red wine and I will dance.
So I just want to remind you that you can go to slido.com, put in the code 593135, and ask a question. You can also raise your hand and ask a question here if you want to.
Come and see me as well if you're a bit shy of speaking publicly. I'm going to be around all the day. I love answering questions. Or Bruce L on Twitter. Honestly, ask me the question, whether I buy my shirt. I'm happy to answer. It's my job.
Awesome. So there's one thing that I wanted to note. I heard a couple of Slack messages popping up. So if you're using Slack, totally fine, work if you want to, but please mute your laptop because it's a bit distracting. Thank you very much. So I'm going to go through, we have a bunch of questions. I'm going to go from the top. The first question is by Eddie Brando. Why doesn't HTML have as many ambassadors advocating for its correct use and opportunities as JS or JS frameworks, and what do you think should be done?
HTML is owned by nobody. React is a great tool, but fundamentally it's a recruitment tool from Facebook. Angular is a great tool, but fundamentally it's a recruitment tool from Google. Google and Facebook have more money than Sir Uncle Timbo and more money than me, even.
As evidenced by your shirt. All right, great answer. If the person has a follow-up question, please just write it down. The next one is from Anonymous from San Bernardino, California. Inputs can be labeled with the for and the ID attributes. Is there a difference between this and wrapping? Is there a difference between this and wrapping the input with a label?
That is a great question, Anonymous of San Bernardino. And in fact, I just got up on stage 2 minutes before and I changed my talk because it showed the input, showed the label wrapping the input. But there is a horrible bug in some software called Dragon, naturally speaking, which people with cerebral palsy or people with motor diseases use to talk to the computer. And that doesn't understand inputs wrapped with labels. And usually, I think, well, if it's a bug, it's not my responsibility to give a shit if software's terrible, but it's a bug that locks real human beings out, so I do give a shit. But Dragon's owned by Microsoft, and Microsoft are eager to be shown as good people. So if you're listening, Bill Gates, sort it out, mate.
I don't think he's involved anymore.
He still watches.
Good answer. All right. Next question. Oh, by the way, are there any questions in the room? Just want to make sure. No. Oh, there's one over there.
Dressforlily.com. It was $20.
There's one thing that breaks this nice assortment of the 120 or so predefined, and that's custom elements. Your take on them, because we use them at work, for example. What's your take on this, which gives you infinitely more HTML now?
Use them if it works for you. Just do what you can to make sure they work if somebody doesn't have JavaScript. Most people do, but it is what it is. Go for it. Don't feel bad. $20, dresslily.com.
Alrighty. So we have a question coming in from Martin.
Martin.
Martin. What do you think about Web Components spec? Does it solve some accessibility issues compared to popular frameworks?
Yes and no. There is a really interesting spec coming out called the Accessibility Object Model, which is going to make writing web components a lot better for accessibility, because you'll be able to wrap the accessibility inside the component in the same way as you wrap the behavior and the styling now. Because at the moment, you have to sprout attributes like aria role and aria this and aria that. And as you know, built-in beats bolt-on bigly.
Such a good mnemonic. All right. I think we have time for both questions that are still here. One is, again, by Anonymous, prolific questioner.
It's Bill Gates.
Probably. Well, good that he's asking, because he wants to know, or they want to know, does structured data matter for accessibility?
No.
Short answer, no. Long answer, no.
But it matters for SEO, etc., which are also part of most people's jobs. Hands up if your boss ever said, I want to be lower in the Google rankings.
Don't want people, buying our stuff.
By structured data, I'm assuming you mean HTML5, microdata, or RDFA. If you're talking about semantic HTML like nav, footer, input, label, well, I hope I've shown that that is a great deal of use for accessibility.
Cool. All right.
Thanks, Bill.
Last question, again from Eddie Brando.
Eddie.
Let's just have your regular audience, apparently. In your opinion, could we pinpoint to a technology or happening that steered the ship towards bad HTML practices critically? I'm thinking of Flash in the web. Ooh, shots fired.
I think Flash was a great technology. I think it's an economic thing. We've got so much work being done that web developers, it used to be those of us old people who were web developers, but now we're getting lots of JavaScript engineers. They're being told to use React or something like that. Understandably, everybody assumes that the boss or the project leader has done the due diligence to make sure that the components they're told to use are accessible and proper. I can't blame you. If your boss tells you you're using this React component library, you assume that somebody else has done the due diligence to make sure it's accessible. You assume that the mega corporation that made these components has given a shit and made them accessible. Sadly, that's not always true.
And that's the last that you'll hear of Bruce on this topic. So thanks very much. We're going to have a 5-minute break now, and then we're going to continue with Chris Adams next. Oh, sorry, Chris, you had a question also. How can I get my product manager client to care about accessibility so I can work on this stuff? This is a very important question. Sorry, I'm just...
Buy them a drink, tell them that I will come looking for them and I am a purple belt in kickboxing. Show them the numbers. I'm going to put my slides on the web. I'll tweet them at Bruce L. all of the data, all of the stuff is linked, and you can get the actual numbers that show that accessibility does matter. I'll probably post them tomorrow because I don't want to use the conference Wi-Fi. I'd rather hurt the hotel Wi-Fi. But I'll publish them, and there you are. Thank you very much for listening. Rock and roll and web standards.